Hey y'all, I'm Crystal. Welcome back to my channel. Today, we are in the kitchen canning potatoes. Now, if you're new around here, welcome. And if you're all about cooking from scratch, preserving your own foods, and eating for better health, well, go ahead and click the subscribe button, and don't forget to smash the bell icon so you're notified every time I post a new video. Canning potatoes is probably a lot easier than you actually think it is. Honestly, the hardest part about canning potatoes is peeling them and chopping them up. Potatoes are a low acid food, so they'll have to be pressure canned. Having jars of canned potatoes in your extended pantry makes mealtime preps really super easy, and it helps with meals when you're on the go. In this video, I'll show you step by step how to can potatoes. Let's get started. The first thing you want to do is inspect each potato for any potential blemishes. I've got a big blemish right here. I want to go ahead and take that off, and it's not going to be wasted. The chickens are going to quite enjoy that. And you can see that these were not perfectly peeled. If you want to peel them to where there's absolutely nothing left on here, you can absolutely do that. If you don't want to peel your potatoes, just make sure that you scrub them down really, really well with a brush. Otherwise, you're going to end up with a lot of dirt in your jars. I prefer to peel my potatoes. Some people prefer not to peel their potatoes. I'm just not a huge fan of the peel from potatoes, so I peel. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna take this potato and slice it 3 times. Or I guess that's actually only 2 slices, making 3 pieces, just like that. So we'll put one of the pieces aside, and we'll line up the other 2. Now I want to make 2 cuts again. So we're going to cut 1 and 2. So now we've taken and made this 6 pieces here. See? Okay. That's actually a pretty good French fry cut. Okay. So from here I'm going to cut 1, 2, maybe 3 times, just kind of eyeballing it here. So we're going to make 1 cut right there. And you can see that it just cuts them up perfect into perfect little bite-sized pieces. And that's the size that I actually like. So we're gonna cut again, and then 1 more time. So there you go. There's our little pieces right there. Now, you don't have to cut them this small if you don't want to. You can definitely cut bigger chunks. Something like this and that. So a nice big chunk like that as well. And I've canned them like this. My thing is after I can them like this, when I go to actually prepare my dish, I end up cutting them back down into smaller sizes because that's my preference. So I just started cutting everything up small to begin with. And we're gonna leave this one just like that. All right. So we're going to remove everything from our cutting board and put it into our water, which we'll talk about in a second. Okay, so now let's talk about our water. You notice that I've been chopping all of these up and putting them in this cold water. Why am I doing that? What I want to do, and you can see how murky the water is, one is as I'm chopping, the water will keep them from turning brown. 2, I want to rinse as much starch out of this as I possibly can. So I'm just going to kind of, run them through the water just like this. Now I'm going to take this over to the sink, and I'm going to drain this out and fill this back up. I'll be right back. I have drained it out, and I filled it back up with water, and you can see the water is a little bit clear, but it's still kind of murky. So we're just going to work our potatoes again, just kind of washing through them like you would rice. Okay, so now we're ready to rinse these again. See how murky that water is? Okay, so I spared you guys every time I rinse the potatoes. I actually rinse the potatoes at the sink 4 times. You can see just how clear the water is. And y'all, if you don't want to do this step, you can totally skip this step. I just find that I like rinsing them, getting as much starch out of there as I can, because it just helps with the appearance and keeps everything a little on the clear side in the jar. Now that I got my potatoes all nice and rinsed, the water's nice and clear, I like the way they look, it's time to jar them up. So today we're canning in quarts. I have 7 quart jars. That's what my canner will hold. To each jar, I'm gonna add 1 teaspoon of salt. If I was canning in pints, I would use half a teaspoon. So I have my potatoes here. I went ahead and drained all of the water off of them. And now it's just time to start filling up the jars. Now I'm going to fill about halfway full, and then I'm going to stop, and I'm just going to kind of pat them down like this. I want to kind of make everything settle, just like that. So now there's not really much airspace in here, and I'm going to continue filling up the jar. And we want to fill this jar to about a 1-inch headspace. You want to fill it to about right here, which is a 1-inch headspace. Now all the jars are filled up. We're going to just simply fill them up with water. Again, we're going to fill it up to a 1-inch headspace. We're going to take a chopstick, or they have a little flat tool that you can use. I use a chopstick, just burping it, just trying to get all of the air bubbles out. And after you burp it, you see, we need to add a little bit more water. It's that easy. Let's do one more. Fill it up with water. If you're on city water and it's got chlorine in it, you might want to buy bottled water. You don't want to use any water that has chlorine in it. Now, if you accidentally overfill it, like I just did, we're going to take out some of that water. If you overfill your jars, you can end up with siphoning. We're going to take a rag and put a little bit of white vinegar on it, and we're just going to clean the rims of each one of our jars. So I've already put the required amount of water in my canner, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and drop a couple of tablespoons of white vinegar in here. The reason why I'm doing that is because I have extremely hard water, and when I put the vinegar in, it really does help to keep the jars clean, and less time for me to clean those jars is a good thing. Okay, so 7 jars fit in this Presto 23 canner. That's what I have, and it is a cold canner right now. I'm going to go ahead and turn the heat on to high and put my lid on. Snap it on, and now we're going to wait till the canner comes up to heat. Okay, so now that this has popped up and you see the steam coming out there, we're going to let this vent for a full 10 minutes. And then we'll put our weight on and start the timer. Okay, so the timer went off, and now it's time to put my weight on. Instant quiet. Now what we're going to do is wait for it to come up to 10 pounds, and this little jiggler will start rocking back and forth and making lots of noise, and then we'll start the timer. Okay, y'all, you can see we are right at 10 pounds. Our little jiggler is going like crazy, and I've already set the timer for 40 minutes. Quart jars are processed for 40 minutes, and pint jars are processed for 35 minutes. Now, you notice that I am at 10 pounds of pressure. That's because of my altitude. For those of y'all that are at a higher altitude, you'll need to check and find out exactly what you need to process this at. 40 minutes later, I turned the heat off and moved the canner away from the heat source. Now I just have to wait for it to cool down naturally, and then I can take the jars out. I just pulled these out of the canner, and as you can see, they are still boiling hot. It's been about 5 minutes since I pulled these out of the canner, so now I'm just gonna go and tighten these back down. And that's how we do it with these reusable lids. You have to be very careful because they're still boiling hot. So I've already done the back row, and you saw me just tighten down the front row. And so the last thing I'm going to do here is just cover all of this up with a towel. And just let these come to room temperature. Yes, it is really that easy to can potatoes. Now, a couple of things I want to show you. I canned these potatoes a couple of days ago. So the first thing I want to talk about is siphoning. Siphoning is when some of the water leaves the jar, and it does happen from time to time. The most common question is, are the contents above the water line any good? Yes, they are still good. However, anything above this water line could end up getting a little discolored, like this. See how this one, it's a little darker up here than it is down here. And these are still good, they just get a little oxidized. This is perfectly fine to eat. It's not gonna make you sick. It doesn't mean that it's gone bad. It just means that it's turned a darker color because it was not under water. Now, as you can see, I've also taken all of the rings off of my jars, and this is how I will store them. You never want to store with your rings on. You always want to store with your rings off. And the reason for this is if you get a false seal, meaning it's sealed today, but maybe a couple of days or a couple of weeks or a couple of months, it comes loose. If you have the ring on, what's going to happen is it's going to force it to stay down and appear to be sealed. But what's actually happening on the inside of the jar is that the contents have actually gone bad, and you definitely don't want to eat bad content. The other thing I wanted to show you, you see how the liquid in here has turned kind of a murky color? This is just from the starch of the potatoes. We did our best to rinse the starch off of our potatoes, but unfortunately some potato varieties have more starch than others, so this is perfectly normal as well. And if you're actually wondering what kind of lids these are, they don't look like the traditional metal lids that you might be used to. These are actually Harvest Guard reusable lids, and I'll have a video coming up. Recap. We know that we could have siphoning in our jars, and we know that the contents above the water line are perfectly safe, even though they may get a little oxidized. We also know that the liquid in the jar may turn a murky color, and that is just the starch of the potatoes, and some species of potatoes have more starches than others. And finally, we always store canned goods with the rings off.